Okay, thank you everyone for pointing that out to Paul and him raising his
Much
hand.
better, much better.
Okay,
All
and
right,
I
all right.
apologize for that. I was not aware. So let's kind of backtrack just a little bit. Here we're looking at the business rules section under administration. And then in the administration section, we went to the business rules section and opened that up where you see both the business rules for auto assignments, escalations, and substatus. And then once we opened that, I went to the add capability. And in the add capability, we're showing the criteria here. So these are the criteria, and I was just pointing out some things may not be viewable the same way here as you see in your instance because some features may not be enabled. So here we're saying that if we want, we can go ahead and add multiple criteria in here. So we can say, okay, it's this organization. So I go in and I select an organization and I'll use the school district academy. So in this particular case, I would like to assign any issue that happens to be submitted by members of the school district academy. And I want to go down here to the bottom and auto assign that to a member of a group or to an individual user. So for here, I'll select Tony Lovelace. He happens to be an agent user in the site, so I can assign it to him. And that's as simple as it gets. Now, where do you see something like that being used? A lot of times in school systems, you have people who may be assigned to a particular school, and it could be multiple schools. So John is handling the elementary school, the middle school, and the high school. And then he is handling all technical issues related to that. So it doesn't matter about the issue, about anything but the organization. The organization is doing the sending. But in some cases, it's not about the organization, it's about the type. So all facilities issues goes to the facility manager. Doesn't matter about anything else. Or all the human resources issues, they go to the human resources director. So we really don't care about what location it is. We don't care what organization it is because the organization is all the same. It's just about the category of the problem. And what I've seen many times is people will add criteria that they don't need, especially the organization record. They'll think that something has to be in these values and they don't. Go with the minimal number of fields here that need to accomplish your mission. That's the idea. Now, in other situations, we have customers that do shift work. For example, in IT help desk a lot of times. What you'll get is a situation where you have a in-hours and an after-hour support team. And when you have an after-hour support team, they may work anywhere from like 6 to midnight or 6 to 6. And then the main IT help desk will work 6 to 6. So it just depends on how you set up. We have the capability of recognizing that. So we can go in here and set up anything submitted after 6 p.m. until 12 midnight would be assigned to the after hours team. Now we have to set up 2 rules here to make sure we're covering both today and tomorrow. So we set another one up to say 12:01 to 6 a.m. So it's 2 rules to cover that overage from one day to the other to make sure that everything handles appropriately. Other things that can happen is Saturday and Sunday, for example. Same rules apply here. Anything submitted Saturday and Sunday goes into the after hours queue. We'll assign it to them. And then anything that may be critical, let's say, for example, a lot of times priority rules this one. So we'll go in here to the priority and we'll set if it's a critical issue and it happens to be submitted on Saturday and Sunday, assign it maybe to the after hours group. So you just pick the after hours group, which I don't even think I have one assigned in here, but you go ahead and you pick, let's say it has to go to the shipping manager or transportation manager, just for the heck of it. He gets all of those issues. So he goes ahead and he'll call someone who's on call, or he'll review it and see what needs to occur and then take care of it at that point. So any combination of information that's up here at the top means who it's going to end up with. It can be combinations of all, critical between 6 and midnight on Saturday and Sunday only. So you can add additional capabilities in here when necessary. But again, keep them simple. Now, one thing I do want to mention also is a precedence list. There can be situations where conflict can occur between two auto assignment rules. For example, a critical priority always goes to the critical response team. But if an issue is submitted and it's a critical priority and it's for school district academy, well, I have one auto assignment rule for school district academy and I have another auto assignment rule for priority critical. They're in conflict because both criteria apply. So how do we resolve the conflict? We look at what's called the dependency order or the precedence list here. And the precedence list allows you to rate what values you want to have precedence over the other. And it goes 1 through 9 in this particular case. Again, your options will change according to the features you've enabled in Issuetrak. But ones would be submitted first. Now in this particular case, priority is 3, organization is 5. So if we look at priority versus organization, priority wins. That's what happens. It would go to the critical response team, not to the organizational assignment, is the way it would work. So it takes a little planning sometimes, especially if you have some potential conflicts that come up, or if you set this up and not paid any attention to the precedence rule, you may not understand how the system is working. But it tries to do its best as it can within the logical constraints that we have within the software in order to make things route appropriately and follow your wishes. You just have to make sure you put all the pieces in place. So let's kind of move to the next step, substatus. I'm going to go to substatus rules before I go to escalation rules. I'm going to end on escalation rules. So when I'm looking at substatus rules, I like to know what my substatuses are first. So in substatus, I have a list of substatuses that have been added, and it is an optional feature. It must be enabled. So what happens is you must turn it on, and then you have the ability to add substatuses to Issutrak. The substatuses can be anything you want them to be, but as I said, what I look at them to be is a life cycle event. In this particular case, an issue moves from pending assignment to an assigned in progress. It may be reassigned to someone else. We may have the customer responses pending or customer response received. We can approve, deny. We can have a pending approval or response and research. Can be waiting on parts. A pre-close warning, which means I'm going to close this automatically and even auto-close the issue. Okay to close, hold, resolved. An issue can go anywhere within this particular list because it's all part of pending assignment to resolved is really the way it works out. So substatus is life cycle. Well, what can happen is when an issue is submitted, depending on how it's submitted, a substatus may not be applied to an issue. So for example, if you go in and select an issue type and you fill it out, and there's no pre-fill for the substatus, it goes ahead and submits with a blank substatus. But I would like to have, say, an escalation rule run because I want to know if when that issue is submitted to when it's actually been responded to. And I want to use substatus in order to attempt that. So what I can do is I can go into the business rules and I can use the substatus rules at the bottom here in order to automatically apply a substatus to an issue based off event. Now, what are events? In this particular case, submitting an issue is an open event. I'm opened the issue. Therefore, this is an open event. If the issue happens to go through an auto assignment, it's going to be an assignment event. You can also add a note. Well, that's a note event. You can close the issue. You can assign a next action, or you can have a note added by the submitter or by someone in the submitter's organization. That's a big one. Think about incoming email. In incoming email, we receive an email from someone and they submit an issue. That's the open event. Someone is assigned to that issue. by auto assignment rule. So they assign the issue, they get an email. So that's an assignment event. Then what happens is they add a note to the issue. So add note event then can go ahead and say, okay, now we're waiting for the customer to respond back to me. That's the substatus. So what happens is when the customer responds, which is the submitter, that is a note added by the submitter. And I may want to change the substatus over to something like note received or submitter updated or something like that. I go in, I review that particular item, and then I want to close the issue. So when I close the issue, I'll either put it into a resolve status, or I may want to even blank things out. Well, you go, Mike, that's awful cool, but how can we set this up? For example, right here, I click on open, and then you have kind of an if-then type situation. If the issue event is open, and if there is any value in the substatus, change it over to something else, or if it happens to be blank. So if it's nothing set, which is a lot of times what happens on open, then I would like to have the substatus set to pending assignment. And I can hit save, and I can make sure that rule runs. Of course, I already have it down here at the bottom, but that's the process that you actually run through it. Now, you'll notice the open event that I just added is right here. You'll notice the process order on that one is a 2. And then here's the assignment event up here. If the issue is assigned and it happens to be in the pending assignment, then send it to assigned in process. I could have done it this way. If it's assigned and the substatus is blank, again, I set it to assigned in process and save that and put that in as a 1. Why would I do that? This is a situation where I am using a blank substatus in here to identify between a blank and a pending assignment. This particular substatus event, I am looking for if the issue has already been set to a pending assignment and it's now being assigned, and I move it in here. This particular item, it has not been assigned. It's essentially an auto assignment rule that fires off on submission of the issue. Why do I want it to be in pending assignment? Well, I don't want it to be in pending assignment because it's assigned by rule. I need it to be in assigned in process. So if I did it opposite, where the open is running first, then the open hits as it runs through the rules, and it sets it to pending assignment. Even though afterwards, what happens is the actual event still occurs and assigns the issue out. So really it is assigned in progress, but the substatus is showing that it is pending assignment because the open rule ran before the assignment. So what we do is we kind of run it backwards. We run the assignment rule first so that it hits the assignment rule and leaves it in the status that we want. If it doesn't assign and the auto assignment rule doesn't fire off, no problem. It just floats right through it and goes down to the open event and then sets it into a pending assignment. So it just falls through the list is what it does. So you have to be a little bit careful and strategic about how you set the process orders up in order to make things work properly for you. And you may see a couple of others in here. This is one where a note has been added by the submitter. So in this particular case, what happens is we've had a user that has been assigned to an issue by rule. They have then added a note to the issue and they put it as a customer response pending. And when they did that, they went ahead and they said they're waiting for the note to be added by the submitter. Well, if the note is added by the submitter and it's a customer response pending, then we want to say that's customer response received, because we want to make sure that we are paying attention to that, because one that's just sitting there waiting is not as important. But when the customer has been involved and engaged with us, we need to get on that one because the customer is waiting for our action now. And what's even more important in that one is that at the bottom of this page, we have the ability to use customer response pending to pause the clock on the issue. Pause the clock means we'll stop escalation notifications, we'll stop service level agreements from running, we'll actually stop the clock. It creates the adjusted time, open time on an issue. So it says the issue is in my hands versus in the customer's hands is what it does. And it's a very important tool. So we're using like 3 different features here in order to manage our issues right here, right now. So you can place any issue on hold just by changing the substatus. So a lot of times what happens with an issue is that we're not ready to complete it. We need to put it on hold, wait for a project budget, whatever it happens to be, put it on hold, don't escalate it, don't notify me, let it sit. And that's what it's doing here. So substatus rules can have a lot of power in how you manage your issues within Issutrak. Now, we've set the stage now. Let's talk about the most powerful one of all, the escalation notifications. When you're running an Issutrak instance, then it's a lot to manage. And if the system can help you run escalation rules, they can either automatically do things for you or just notify you of potential problem issues, then that's a powerful tool for you in management. You don't have to be looking at the list. You don't have to be looking at a lot of other things. You're looking at the emails, letting you know as the assignee on the issue or as a manager to know what's going on. So let's look at an escalation rule. An escalation notification has 3 separate parts within it. First, you have to set the interval, and the interval is the time frame. The time frame is the only thing that's really important. It's the only thing required, and it's in days, hours, or minutes. And it runs from the time entered or from the last time the issue was updated, changed. That's last activity. Both of them are important. For example, if an issue is submitted, then we would like to have it closed within 1 day. That's time entered. However, if we've already responded to that issue, then I would like to make sure that every 3 days the customer is notified with something. So I will run an escalation rule that says there must be an activity event occurring on that issue every 3 days. If not, notify me by email, which I'll show you in a minute. Below that, we can further refine this by adding separate conditions. And again, the conditions that apply here are going to depend upon the features that are enabled in Issutrak. Again, things like substatus may not be enabled, location may not be enabled, those type of things may work. But what this gives you the ability to do is say, okay, by type and by organization, escalate the issue if it's been sitting for more than 1 day. Now, an interesting part about this is even though the clock is paused, you can still run an escalation notification. And we added this because we wanted some ability to prompt issues that were sitting outside of our purview. They're in the customer's hand, but we still wanted to go ahead and prompt customers for that. And I'll show you how you can add a note to the issue that can go to the customer to remind them to respond to an escalation notification. Also, there's things like issue has escalated. Sometimes customers wanted us to escalate an issue 1 time and 1 time only, because as long as all of the escalation information is still valid, we'll continue to escalate that issue over and over and over again. You can even pick who it's currently assigned to, or whether it's assigned or unassigned, or who it's currently assigned to. And if you use required by date or target date, you can even escalate based off time being passed. So the criteria, again, is an and criteria, and selecting the criteria is very important to how the rule runs. The things that can happen is you can change assignment. You can go ahead and add an action that will change an assignment. Move the priority up or down. Change its substatus, and then here at the bottom, add a note. So if an issue is pending customer response and it's been sitting for 3 days, escalate the issue and send them an email by adding a note to the issue, which automatically sends a note, an email to the user. You can even make that note private or public. Private note a lot of times will go to the assignee of the issue. Hey, dummy, update this issue. You know, it's been sitting for 3 days, no action's been taken, you need to do something about it. Or in some cases, auto close the issue. If you've ever received any notifications from our support team, we use a 3-step notification system. We will update the issue, we'll send you a notification, say, hey, do you need help? Then we'll send it again, do you need help? Then we'll send it again, do you need help? And then the next notification you get, we've closed it automatically. Some people have issues that they can resolve, and when they resolve it, they must have user feedback and say it's resolved by the user, and the user don't care, it works. So it'll sit and sit and sit. So in this case, we'll set up sometimes a 30-day rule. Says if an issue has been sitting with no activity for 30 days, close the issue as long as it's in this substatus of resolved, for example. So you can do things like that. You can give it a name, and you can even control the process order. Rule of thumb, long-term issues, long-term escalation rules go first, short-term ones go second. Think about it this way. If you have a 2-day escalation notification, then it's going to run every 2 days. Well, on the 4th day, I would like to go ahead and escalate that to another manager. So I'll add a manager to the email distribution list of that escalation notification. If you just run the 2-day first, then the process order, it'll go ahead and just run 2 days and never get to the 4-day. It's always 2 days. So you run the 4-day ahead of the 2-day, and then you'll get the 4-day notification on the 4th day, because now it's going to hit before the process order is going to control how it runs. So a lot going on here with this particular process, on a lot of capability in here. And unfortunately, I'm beginning to run short of time. So I've talked too much before now, so that's my fault. But if you need Paul and I to come in and talk to you about these, please let us know, or even talk to the support team, and we'll be happy to help you with planning all of these out and getting them done. So, have you got a question, sir? I see your hand is up again.
Before we are running short on time, we have about 4 more minutes for this section. And rest your voice for a few here, Mike. And I did want to cover one thing before we leave the topic, because we still get, I mean, how many years have I been working with you, right? We still get questions about this one thing all the time. And I wanted to talk about the polling interval here. Yep. Now you can see the part of the screen that Mike is on is the perfect place to talk about that, right? So if I have an escalation rule that I really don't care about time, right? I really don't care. I just want to make sure that a note is added when an issue is in this certain substatus. I just want it to happen as quickly as possible. So what our customers do, and we've seen this over and over again, because it's just kind of a gotcha here. They put in 1 minute after last activity, right? And then they leave the issue sit for a minute, right? And nothing happens. The code that actually makes this work runs on a polling interval. And when I say that now, that term, right, kind of makes a little more sense now. That means it's not on all the time. The engine that runs this runs in the background every few minutes. And by default, for most of our customers, that polling interval is every 15 minutes. Now, if you're an on-premise customer and you've tricked your system out and you've updated that value, you might be able to get it to run faster. But for most of our cloud customers, they're at a 15-minute polling interval. So if you can put in less time than that, but the actual code that makes these work in the background is going to run every 15 minutes, check your rules against open issues and fire off when appropriate.
Yeah, that's a good point, Paul. I'm glad you brought that up.
It's kind of a gotcha, right?
It is kind of a gotcha.
You can fill in 1 minute there. There's nothing to keep you from putting 1 minute right there, but it won't run in 1 minute.
It's one of those things that's not in your face, so you don't see it. Even as a system administrator, you don't see that particular interval in here. And it has caused problems, and Paul, you both of us have run into it, both on the support desk and run into it here. So yeah, it's a lot of times it can run into problems with it.
And Paul, thanks for not calling me out on that.
Yeah, I didn't want to name names, but in fact, in the new features, we're going to see there's a lot of things that happen kind of in the background on a polling interval, and I think we're going to start to see some of these things become visible in Issuetrak. In fact, we're going to see a different feature that works on a polling interval and is now visible and settable within Issutrak. But it's a different feature, though. It's not this feature.
Right.
So, but we're going to talk. That's a teaser for our coming attractions here, for
That's
our
right.
new features.
Hey
So-
guys, while we're still on this one, and we don't need to go into detail, but can you, since it's still a new feature, can you mention de-escalation?
Oh,
Yes,
that's a good one.
Good one.
Yep.
So a couple of versions ago, it's so many, we're coming out with new features so quickly now, I can't even keep up with which version stuff has come out with, but we gained the ability to de-escalate an issue. And traditionally, if an issue got escalated, it got that red E in the dashboard, right? It got this notification right here that Mike's going to show us on the issue, and there was nothing you could do about it, right? It was escalated, whether that was an intentional thing and it meant that there was something wrong with the issue, the fact that it escalated, or if there wasn't something wrong with the issue. Because as we already have kind of said here, you may escalate an issue and there's nothing wrong with that, right? Well, sometimes we want to be able to de-escalate that issue. We want to kind of bring that issue down from that escalated status, back to a normal, a non-escalated status. And if we enable that new feature in Issuetrak, we get this button, just like Mike's doing here, right? And that allows us to take away the red E and remove that notification. So now you still have a history. You can see, hey, this was escalated at one point, but it's not now. And it really allows us to add more meaning to the dashboard and get more meaning into our view of the issue. That's the idea anyway.
And you saw now when issue number 1075 went completely off of this report because now it is no longer an escalated issue. It moved from escalated to a de-escalated status. So it'll still show the previously escalated information in here. So when you click on that, it still shows you the history of escalations in the past, but it also adds in here a de-escalation history event also. So it's a nice feature, so you can even report on that if you need to. Good bring up, Tony. Good hit.
Thanks. But it's a feature that was added in a release a couple of versions ago,
Yeah,
but you have to go to the system settings and enable it.
that is
So
correct.
unless
Right.
you read the release notes or you're having those conversations with the issue trackers, you may not be aware of it.
Matter of fact,
So-
I think we covered that in the last, it was the last, it was either the last
Webinar.
product update and product update, or the one before that, one of the two. So it's within the last 2 or 3 months that we've added this feature. Okay, Tony, what do you think? Should we just go ahead and roll right on in?
Let's,
to
Yeah,
the,
let's keep moving,
yeah,
Okay.
I'm ready to start talking here. Hey, I'm
will-
waking up.
because we got 2 releases and it is a lot of end user features that customers have been asking for years.
Let me
So-